What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. Now, the first draft is the beginning. It's the raw material. It's not the story, novel, or memoir itself. Not yet. You're opening up the possibilities of what your novel or memoir could be. It's a raw idea that you keep following and exploring. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. A common obstacle I hear writers facing is how to begin writing their story. Do you start with an outline? Do you just start writing that first draft and revise from there? What if you suck at outlining? Maybe you know your characters, you know your theme, and you know the main direction of your plot, but when it comes to plot points and midpoints and beats, you're frustrated because you just can't accomplish that. Or maybe you do have a rich, detailed outline, but now that you're writing the story, you're still getting stuck. I see this all the time. In this episode, I'm going to give you an alternative. We're going to start with generating material. So you'll generate a rough first draft, and then you'll outline from there, and then work that outline to be more fluid and better paced. So material first, outline second. So rather than start with an outline, we're going to start with generating your story material first. So let's get right to it. Writers often think that they should start with an outline. And if they start with that outline, they'll write the first draft based on that outline. But because they have this preconceived concept of what their story is and what it's about, that often gets in the way of actually writing it. And I see many writers try to write the whole story with that first draft. And then they think they'll just revise it a few times and then they'll have a book. So they painstakingly write from one chapter to the next, from one scene to the next. They try to write that first draft in order because they think that's the most efficient way to write a book. And they'll either get stuck somewhere in the middle, or they'll get frustrated and lost in the mess of their draft. And sometimes they'll get bored with their own story. And then they'll start a new story and the whole cycle repeats. So we're going to explore a different approach to writing first drafts. We're going to start with material first, outline second. This approach is great if outlines just don't work for you. And if you already have an outline, but you're still struggling to write your story, or you're not happy with the story you wrote, this will help you get your arms around your material and finish it. So phase 1 is your discovery draft. Now, your first draft is not the be-all, end-all. I want to encourage you to let go of this idea that your first draft is where you write a story from start to finish, and that it needs to be told in sequence or some kind of plot order. That one scene leads to the next, and so on. That your first draft needs to all fall into place as you go. I see far too many writers get straitjacketed because they're following an outline, or they're trying to write the story in that first draft. And they either give up in frustration when the story doesn't fulfill the requirements of their outline, or they lose interest because they're not really excited about what they're writing, because they're writing to satisfy expectations of genre, expectations of plot. But the purpose of your first draft is to generate your material. You want to give your ideas some air and explore what you have to say. Now, you will start outlining your plot from what you generate from your first draft, and that will make it easier to see where there are any plot holes or unnecessary repetition or extraneous actions. Any weak spots you'll be able to spot in this outline. It's easier to revise the outline and move things around there than it is to move big chunks of narrative, whole scenes, paragraphs, whole passages. So rather than put so much pressure on your first draft, think of your first draft as an exploration. You're allowing your raw material to tell you what your story's trying to become. You're discovering the story. That's the purpose of your first draft, to discover what it is you have to say. There's no sequential order in your first draft. You will be writing out of order. You'll be writing more towards what's emotionally significant to you. You're following your own inclinations here, what you're excited about, what you're curious about, what you're moved to write. Now, your first draft may include sentence fragments, idea fragments, and there may be big gaps between significant plot points. Kenneth Atchity, who wrote the book Write Time, talks about a two-part process to writing a book. So he noticed over many years of working with new authors that those who actually finished their books allowed what he called random access writing before any organization or structuring happened. In other words, the writers who finished their books didn't use an outline, or they didn't start out with an outline. Now, for my plotters out there, you're probably saying, no way, I need that roadmap. I need to organize first. But Atchity was proposing, with years of evidence to back him up, that our creative brains aren't designed to do that. Our creative brains need to explore before they organize. So right brain holistic before left brain linear. He called the process writing islands. For example, you may start with an idea for the middle of your story, or maybe even the end of your story, instead of trying to figure out chapter 1 first, which is what most writers do. So this means there is going to be gaps between scenes or groups of scenes. The thinking is, once you have those islands, the things you're excited to write about, what you're drawn to write about, you can write the scenes that join them. You can bridge those gaps. So you can write scenes to connect them. So in the discovery phase, you're chasing the ideas or things or character arcs that feel interesting to you. At this stage, you won't always know what you're looking for or even how it's all going to come together. With this approach, you get a sense of the story you're trying to tell or a story you could tell, and you start following that trail. Ideas lead to more ideas, and hopefully you're surprised about what ideas you generate. Now, what if you get stuck? Well, what I like to do with any first draft, and even later drafts when I'm working with writers, is to look at what you've already written to inform you how to move forward. There are always clues to where the story should go or what direction it could go. You want to look for patterns, themes, images that resonate for you. I don't know who first said this, but it's been passed down to me from many mentors over the years. The story is smarter than you are, meaning your subconscious dialed up all those images, characters, random scenes, conversations, settings, etc. And all you have to do is pay attention to what you put on the page. So if you get stuck during this exploratory stage, you can look back into your draft and find something to work off of, something you were excited to read again. Mine your story for what it's trying to become. This gives you full rein to experiment, take risks, meet different characters, and just play. You're writing where the energy is. You're following your curiosities, your fascination. You're not writing for the reader yet. You're writing for yourself, so you can discover the story as you write. So it's going to be disjointed. There's going to be fragments, and that's okay. Don't worry. It will all come together in the outlining, rewriting, and revision process. So write where the energy is. Follow where you're most compelled to write. Write what excites you. Your excitement generates more excitement. Now, if you're not excited or curious about what you're writing, stop writing. Go back into your draft and find that spot that excited you and take it from there. It's much easier to work with a draft that excited you in the initial writing rather than a lot of dead passages that you wrote because you were trying to satisfy your outline or you were trying to satisfy a reader rather than please yourself. So I want you to revel in your own pleasure at writing this first draft. This will give you the freedom to experiment, to take risks, to relinquish this idea that you need to start with an outline. Don't worry, the outline comes next. But it's better to have a rich, loamy first draft that you can prune and shape later during revision. So play, explore, write in fragments. Trust that whatever comes up on the page is leading you to the story you want and need to tell. Because you'll be writing where your energy takes you. Now, the first draft is the beginning. It's the raw material. It's not the story, novel, or memoir itself. Not yet. You're opening up the possibilities of what your novel or memoir could be. It's a raw idea that you keep following and exploring. You're letting go here. You're writing without any adherence to order or plot or any preconceived notions about genre or any expectations of genre. You're writing without any premature fixation on structure or whether your story idea is saleable or not. You're not worrying about whether you have a good idea or a bad idea. You're not judging your work here. If you allow yourself to lose a certain amount of control in this exploratory stage, the story you want and need to tell will emerge and it will be more powerful. You'll have a more alive, vibrant draft to work with. And everything you need will be in that first draft. One of the things I work on with writers is to identify the clues within their draft about what the real story is, where the heart of the story is, where they can explore deeper, where they can expand an idea or image. The purpose of your first draft is not to complete a finished draft that you can then revise. Not yet. The purpose of your first draft is to explore what stories within you needing to come out. With this approach, you don't have to have the plot all mapped out. You're letting the characters and the plot go whichever way they're going to go. So let them lead you rather than you lead them. Hopefully you're excited about what you're generating because it's coming from a place that's more intuitive, more receptive. If you're not curious or excited or fascinated with what you're writing, don't write it. Don't force it. You never want to be bored with your own writing. And you don't want to be writing obligatory scenes you've been told you should have. Forget about the hero's journey for now. Forget about Save the Cat. Forget about the tropes. You're not writing an off-the-rack plot. You're not writing an off-the-rack story. So, material first. With this approach, you get a sense of the story you're trying to tell or a story you could tell, and you start following that trail. Okay, so you may have 200 pages, 300 pages or more, but you've taken the story as far as you can. So it has some semblance of a beginning, middle, and end, but probably not in that order. So put the draft away for at least 2 weeks, ideally 2 to 6 weeks, so that you're coming back to it fresh from the perspective of a reader coming to your pages for the first time. So you'll see things you couldn't see initially in that exploratory phase. Now, what are you supposed to do while this draft is resting? Well, you can start on another discovery draft for another story. I suggest keeping a story bank. I do this on the Notes app on my phone. This is just a running list of story ideas as they come to you. It could include images or observations while you're out and about, just stray ideas, or it could be story ideas from your life. These could all become a first draft. Okay, so you have the first draft, your discovery draft, and now we're going to move on to phase 2. We're going to find the structure in what you just wrote. So you're going to take your discovery draft and create a narrative outline of what already exists on the page. We're looking for the main story here, the action. This is not your final outline, by the way. We're just seeing what's on the page right now. We're getting our arms around it. So you're just seeing what's already there in the text. Now, you're going to revise this outline, but first you have to see what you've generated and get a handle on that. So you're going to lift the action out of your first draft, just the external action. You're not going to go into the interior of your characters, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, just what's on the surface of the story, your plot. So we're looking just for the action, what happens. Now, I usually do this with pencil and paper, and then I transfer it onto a Google Doc. I want you to write it in paragraph form, a summary of what happens, action by action. This happens, then this happens, then that happens. So you're just summarizing the action here, not how characters felt about the action, just the surface events. Once you have your outline typed out in front of you, I want you to look for a few things. So what you're looking for here is who the main protagonist is. Why is this person telling his or her story? Why now? You're also looking for an inciting incident, a significant situation or event that catapults your protagonist into unfamiliar territory. Now, remember, this is not in order, so you may not find this inciting incident in the beginning of your story. It may be somewhere else. But you're also looking for big turns in the story, significant turning points. You're looking for where the action feels mundane or dull or repetitive, places where there's too much intense action piled on or too many major events following one after the other. You're looking for where the action lags or where there's too many things thrown together too close. You're looking for where the story escalates or where the stakes rise. Now, maybe your discovery draft doesn't do all of these things, and maybe it doesn't do any of them, but you'll start to see where the holes in the story's logic are. If there's no situation that sets the story in motion, you'll have to think this through for the revised outline. Take your time with this. So you've outlined what you have on the page in your first draft, and now you're going to revise that outline. You'll take out all the unnecessary actions, all the repetitive actions, and you're going to create an outline that is more cohesive and which has some sense of rising stakes, consequences, cause and effect. So you're looking for the shape and you're adjusting that shape into a tighter, more compelling outline. When you revise your outline, it's far more efficient than moving big chunks and chapters and scenes around or cutting chapters and scenes from your first draft. Now, the good news is you can do this at any stage of the writing process. Even if you've started with an outline and you've written to that outline as your first, even second or third draft, I think it helps when you're not sure if the story is working to, again, go through it, just the action, and see what's happening on the page in the story's current stage of development. Again, just the surface events. From here, you should be able to strengthen any gaps, any weak spots. You can evaluate the structure, the point of view, the shape of your novel. So you adjust the structure once you see those gaps. Now, knowing the end, how your story ends, really does help here, because you want to see in your outline, how does everything lead to that ending? How does everything escalate to that ending? You know, plot isn't something you do once and then you're done. It's a way of thinking your way through your story. So think of your outline as a way to think your way through your story. You don't just do it once. It's a great way of looking at what's on the page thus far, rather than looking at the whole manuscript. You are going to revise that manuscript. You are going to rewrite it. But for now, we're just working on the outline. Now, if you have subplots or different storylines involving different characters, then you're going to structure those characters' storylines separately. You're going to write a separate outline for each of those storylines. Often writers I work with are balancing multiple storylines in their novels. It really can get out of hand if you're trying to write a single outline with multiple storylines. Don't worry, you can splice them in later, but keep them separate for now. So write a separate outline for each character's journey. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of work, but I promise you it's worth it. It is actually the most efficient way to write a story and actually finish it. Okay, let's wrap this up. We talked about the pitfalls of outlining before you generate material and thinking of your first draft as the story from start to finish. So we talked about generating material first and then outlining second. So phase one is generating material. You want to think of your first draft as your discovery draft. You're seeing what you have to say, what ideas excite you, ideas lead to more ideas. So let them come to you. Don't control them. Don't worry about sentence fragments or stray ideas or scenes. Trust what comes up. Think of writing the islands. Once you have ideas that truly excite you, you can write the scenes that connect those islands during the rewriting and revision stage. So phase 1 is your discovery draft. You're generating your material. Now, once you've given your discovery draft a rest and you created some distance between yourself and the work, we move to phase 2, outline. So you're going to outline what's already on the page. Again, just the action, a narrative summary of what happens. Then you'll look for plot holes and redundancies or mundane action. You'll locate the big movements in the story, the inciting incidents, significant turning points. Then revise that outline to be tighter, more fluid, more connected. And if you have more than one storyline, outline those separately. Now, I know writers are going to resist this approach, and that's okay. But I want you to hear this. The outlining can be done at various stages of the writing process. I think it's always a good idea to look at what's on the page as you go and write a narrative summary of what's happening scene by scene, chapter by chapter, to assess whether the story's working or not. Plot isn't something you do first and then you forget about it. It's a way of thinking your way through your material. So, material first, outline second. Now, once you've written your discovery draft and you've written the narrative outline of what's already on the page, and you've revised that outline to something tighter and more cohesive, there's still a lot of work to do. You're going to do rewriting and revising. We'll get to that in another episode later on, but I wanted to give you a different approach to writing first drafts and to take some of the pressure off of writing that first draft. Just think of it as a discovery draft. Then look at what you have and then revise that outline. You'll have a solid outline, but that's something you can do throughout the writing process. It's fluid. I hope this episode gives you a different perspective on how to write a first draft or how to approach your second and third draft, whatever stage of development your story is at. You can always see what you have, action by action, and then make the changes from there. Once you know what's actually on the page, it makes it so much easier to revise it, to edit. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.